Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we get into tonight's game, I wanted to ask a question. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out today's sponsor, Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I have used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them to get the best value for my extra cards. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have three main services. Their standard service lets you send them your unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best price for your cards. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half the fee of the standard service and charge no fee per card. Their sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. They give you the best price for your cards. They work with competitive buy listing partners, including ones not open to the public. Users get an average of 19% more for their collection than they would from any major retail buy list, even with Card Conduit's fees. Card Conduit also optimizes buy listing for card condition as well. Since vendors have different penalties for wear and tear, Card Conduit will find the best buy list priced against the specific condition of the card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the description below or use the promo code POWER, you will also get 10% off of their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ryan piloting Mizzix of the Is Magnus. This is a deck that uses its commander to reduce the cost of spells to go for a storm win. Ryan's opening hand contains a Mystic Remora, Swan Song, Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, Flooded Strand, Mystical Tutor, and his London Mulligans are Lightning Bolt and Intuition. Next, we have our Mox Pearl patron Sean piloting the partner pair of Dargo the Shipwrecker and Thrasios Triton Hero. This is a mid-range deck that tries to grind value with Thrasios or use Dargo loops to kill the table. Sean's opening hand contains a Tropical Island, Scalding Tarn, Eternal Witness, Grape Shot, Brain Freeze, Mystic Remora, and a Seedborn Muse. After that, we have Drake piloting Esika, God of the Tree. This deck uses Jeskai Ascendancy to generate value and storm off for the win. Drake's opening hand contains a Breeding Pool, Mana Confluence, Taiga, Force of Negation, Veil of Summer, Lotus Petal, and a Soul Ring. Finally, we have Ashani piloting the partner pair of Tymna the Weaver and Thrasios Triton Hero. This is a Protean Hulk deck that slows down the game with Hate Bears before landing and killing Hulk to fetch up a combo win. Ashani's opening hand contains an Undergrowth Stadium, Thalia Guardian of Thraben, Springleaf Drum, Haven Mind Sensor, Boseiju Who Endures, Vault of Champions, and his London Mulligan is an Endurance. Without further ado, let's kick off this bustling, bubbly, bouncy bombardment. Ryan won the Tortilla Challenge and gets to start us off. Ryan draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts a Mystic Remora and passes the turn. Sean draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts a Mystic Remora of his own. Remora triggers and Ryan draws. Sean passes. Drake draws and plays a Mana Confluence. He casts Jeweled Lotus. Both Remoras trigger and Sean and Ryan draw. He cracks his Jeweled Lotus to cast his commander, Esika, God of the Tree. Drake ends his turn. Ashani draws and plays a Vault of Champions. He casts a Springleaf Drum and both draw from Remora. Ashani ships the turn. During his upkeep, Ryan pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Steam Vents into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. Ryan ends his turn. During his upkeep, Sean pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays a Tropical Island. He casts a Mana Vault, and Ryan draws from Remora. Sean ships the turn to Drake. Drake draws and plays a Taiga. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Esika. Ryan takes it, and in his second main phase, Drake casts a Soul Ring. Both Remoras trigger, and Sean and Ryan draw. Drake passes to Ashani. Ashani draws and plays an Undergrowth Stadium. He casts Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. Ashani gives the turn to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan pays to keep his Remora. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks Sean with Ragavan. Sean takes it, Ragavan triggers, and Sean exiles Trick Mind, and Ryan creates a treasure. In his second main phase, Ryan plays a Snow-Covered Island. He casts Jeweled Lotus, and Sean draws off of Remora. He casts his commander, Mizzix of the Is Magnus. All through, Ryan passes to Sean. During his upkeep, Sean pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays a Rejuvenating Springs. He passes, discarding to hand size, including Malevolent Hermit. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Ashani with Esika. Ashani takes it, and in his second main phase, Drake plays a Breeding Pool into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Preordain, and both draw from Remora. He scries 2 and draws a card. He casts a Lotus Petal, and both draw again. Drake gives the turn to Ashani. Ashani draws and plays a Morphic Pool. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He passes. During his upkeep, Ryan pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays a City of Brass. He moves to combat and attacks Sean with Ragavan. Sean takes it, Ragavan triggers, Sean exiles Lotus Petal, and Ryan creates a treasure. In his second main phase, Ryan casts Sean's Lotus Petal from exile. Remora triggers and Sean draws. Ryan passes, discarding to hand size. During his upkeep, Sean lets his Remora die. He draws and plays a Wooded Foothills. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He casts Mox Amber, and Ryan draws from Remora. Sean passes, discarding to hand size. Drake draws and plays a Volcanic Island. This is exactly the time we hit 80,000 subscribers. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much. Drake does nothing else and passes the turn. Ashani draws, takes no actions, and passes. During his upkeep, Ryan lets his Remora die. The table finally breathes a sigh of relief, and Ryan draws for turn. He casts Ledger Shredder. He casts a Lotus Petal. Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives a Brain Freeze, giving Ledger Shredder a +1/+1 counter. He plays a Training Center for turn. He casts Lion's Eye Diamond. Ryan gives the turn to Sean. Sean draws and plays a City of Brass. He casts Seedborn Muse. Sean ends his turn. Sean untaps with Drake through Seedborn. Drake draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Esika. Ryan blocks with Ledger Shredder. Drake passes. At the end of Drake's turn, Sean activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Mox Opal into his hand. Still in the end step, Drake channels Boseiju, who endures, destroying Sean's Mana Vault. Then Sean fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. Still in the end step, Sean activates Thrasios. In response, Ashani casts Assassin's Trophy targeting Seedborn. Seedborn is destroyed, and Sean fetches up an island onto the battlefield. Then Sean scries 1 and reveals a Crop Rotation into his hand. The turn moves to Ashani. Ashani draws, holds up mana, and passes. Ryan draws and passes. At the end of Ryan's turn, Sean cracks his Wooded Foothills, pays a life, and fetches up a Stomping Ground into play tapped. Still in the end step, Sean pays 2 life to cast Noxious Revival targeting Seedborn in his graveyard. In response, Drake hard casts Force of Negation, countering and exiling Noxious Revival. The turn moves to Sean. Sean draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Breeding Pool into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Benevolent Geist from his graveyard for its disturbed cost. He casts Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives a Misty Rainforest. Sean passes. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Sean with Esika. Sean blocks with Selvala. Drake passes. At the end of Drake's turn, Ashani activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing an Exotic Orchard into play tapped. Ashani draws and passes. At the end of Ashani's turn, Ryan casts Mystical Tutor. Mizzix triggers, and Ryan gets an experience counter. In response, Ashani flashes in an Aven Mind Sensor. In response, Drake cracks his Bloodstained Mire and pays a life. In response, Sean casts Crop Rotation, sacrificing Stomping Ground and fetching up a Gaia's Cradle onto the battlefield. Then Drake fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. Then Mind Sensor resolves. Then Tutor resolves, Ryan searches the top 4, putting a bonus round onto the top of his library. The turn moves to Ryan. Ryan draws and decides he's going to go for it. He casts Bonus Round. Mizzix triggers, and Ryan gets an experience counter. Ryan taps the City of Brass to cast Pyretic Ritual. Ledger Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives a Polluted Delta. Bonus Round triggers and copies Pyretic Ritual. Then Ryan adds 6 red. Ryan casts Invent. Mizzix triggers, and Ryan gets an experience counter. Bonus Round triggers, and Ryan copies Invent. Invent resolves, Ryan searches the top 4 through Aven Mind Sensor, putting Jessica's Will and Force of Negation into his hand. Then the original resolves, and Ryan searches the top 4, putting Bond of Insight into his hand. All set up for his next turn, Ryan passes. At the end of Ryan's turn, Sean taps his City of Brass to activate Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing an Emergence Zone into play tapped. Still in the end step, Drake casts Veil of Summer. Bonus round triggers, and Drake copies it. Then they both resolve, and Drake draws 2 cards. Still in the end step, Drake casts Tainted Pact. Ledger Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives March of Swirling Mist, giving Shredder a counter. Bonus round triggers, and Drake copies it. The copy resolves, and he exiles until he reveals Thassa's Oracle, putting it into his hand. Then the original resolves, and Drake exiles until he reaches the second to last card, putting Wooded Foothills into his hand. The turn finally moves to Sean. Sean draws and casts his other commander, Dargo the Shipwrecker. Selvala triggers, and Sean draws. He activates Selvala, adding 7 green. He casts Eternal Witness. Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives Bond of Insight, giving Shredder a counter. Witness enters, and Sean returns Seedborn Muse to his hand. He casts Seedborn Muse. In response, Drake casts Mindbreak Trap for its alternate cost, targeting Seedborn. In response, Sean taps the City of Brass to cast Dispel, countering Mindbreak Trap. Then Seedborn Muse resolves. Sean casts Sensei's Divining Top and passes to Drake. Sean untaps with Drake through Seedborn. During Drake's upkeep, Sean activates his Sensei's Top, looking at and rearranging the top 3. Drake draws and casts Past in Flames. In response, Sean activates his Emergence Zone, sacrificing it, giving his spells flash until the end of turn. He casts Mox Opal. He activates Sensei's Top, drawing a card and putting top on top. He casts Wheel of Fortune. Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives Simian Spirit Guide, giving Shredder a counter. In response, Ryan casts Final Fortune. In response, Sean casts Muddle the Mixture, targeting Final Fortune. In response, Ryan casts Deflecting Swat for its alternate cost, targeting Muddle. In response, Sean casts Pact of Negation, targeting Final Fortune. With nothing else, Pact counters Final Fortune, Swat resolves, and then redirects Muddle to Past in Flames. Then Muddle counters Past in Flames. Then Wheel of Fortune resolves, everyone discards their hand and draws 7. Drake attempts to draw from an empty library through Wheel and loses the game. The turn moves through steps and phases, and before the end of turn, Sean casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters, and Sean creates 2 treasures. He casts Llanowar Elves. He recasts Sensei's Divining Top. He activates Top, rearranging the top 3. He casts Finale of Devastation, where X equals 2. This is when everyone reminds him of the Aven Mind Sensor on the battlefield. So, Sean searches the top 4, failing to find. Still in the end step, Ashani casts Vampiric Tutor. In response, Sean pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, countering Vampiric Tutor. The turn moves to Ashani. Sean attacks with Ashani through Seedboard. Ashani draws and moves to combat. He attacks Ryan with Thalia. Ryan scratches his head a bit, as he clearly has a blocker that could kill Thalia. So, Ryan declares no blocks and takes it. In his second main phase, Ashani casts Demonic Consultation. In response, Sean activates his top, rearranging the top 3. Consult resolves, and Ashani exiles his library. He casts Thassa's Oracle. In response, Sean activates top, drawing a card and putting top on top. He casts Force of Will, paying a life and exiling a blue card, countering Oracle. With nothing else and no library, Ashani passes. At the end of Ashani's turn, Sean activates Thrasios 5 times, scrying 1 and revealing a Tidespout Tyrant into his hand, revealing a Counterbalance into his hand, revealing a Veil of Summer into his hand, revealing a Lion's Eye Diamond into his hand, and then finally revealing an Underworld Breach into his hand. The turn moves to Ryan. Sean untaps with Ryan through Seedborn. Ryan draws and casts Stern Dismissal, targeting Benevolent Geist. In response, Sean casts Veil of Summer. Veil resolves, Sean draws, and Stern Dismissal fizzles. Next, Ryan taps his Mana Confluence to cast Underworld Breach. Ledger Shredder triggers, and in response, Sean activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Steam Vince into play tapped. He activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Phyrexian Altar into his hand. He activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Goblin Bombardment into his hand. He activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing an Endurance into his hand. Then Sean taps a City of Brass to flash in an Endurance. Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives a snow-covered island. In response, desperately trying to find an answer, Ryan taps a City of Brass to cast Brainstorm, drawing 3 and putting 2 back on top. With no other answers, Endurance resolves, and Ryan puts his graveyard onto the bottom of his library in a random order. Then Ledger Shredder's trigger resolves, and Ryan connives an island. Then Underworld Breach resolves. With no graveyard and nothing else to do, Ryan passes, sacrificing Underworld Breach. Sean draws and plays an Arid Mesa. He casts Goblin Bombardment. He sacrifices Dargo to Goblin Bombardment, dealing 1 to Thalia, killing it. He casts Phyrexian Altar. Shredder triggers, and Ryan connives Mizium Mortars, giving Shredder a counter. Sean sacrifices Dockside, Eternal Witness, and Endurance to Phyrexian Altar, adding 3 red. He recasts his commander, Dargo the Shipwrecker, reduced by his sacrificed creatures. Dargo enters, and Sean draws off of Selvala. Sean presents a loop of sacrificing Dargo to Altar, adding a red, then using that red to recast Dargo. Each time he does this, he draws off of Selvala. He continues to draw his deck. He casts Burgi, God of Storytelling. Now he presents the same loop, except this time he sacks Dargo to Goblin Bombardment, dealing a damage to an opponent, using the mana from Burgi to recast Dargo. He does this over and over until the table is dead, and Sean wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a cool game. Congrats to Sean on his win. He was able to get a ton of advantage through the classic Thrasios Seedborn line. He used that advantage to control the table with answer after answer to the game-ending threats. His interaction was perfectly timed and in abundance. It is no wonder he won December's Mox Masters with this very deck. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.